So today we are joined by Mr. Abdullah Mr. Abdullah Almanai, who is the Executive Director of the King Hamad Global Center for Coexistence and Tolerance. Then we have also joined by a child. Yara is a 17-year-old girl from Sudan living in Egypt since 2022. She's a young advocate for building a safer world for children, all for children. And then we are joined by Mr. Kilian Nyambu. He is from the National Cohesion and Integration Commission from Kenya. He's the Deputy Director there. Welcome, Mr. Kilian. We are also joined by Dr. David Fernandez Puñana, who's the Ambassador and Permanent Observer of the UN University for Peace to the United Nations Office in Geneva and Vienna, and the UNESCO office in Paris. Welcome, Dr. Puñana. We are joined by Dr. Sebastian Wasch, who's the Professor of Education at the University of Münster in Germany. Welcome, Dr. Wasch. And then we are joined by Ms. Joyce Pone, who's the Head of Education, Chief of Education at UNESCO Regional Office for South Asia. So these are our panelists for today who will help us to unpack this topic of what is the role of education in responding to hate speech. To kick us off and to start this conversation, let me invite Mr. Abdullah Al-Manai, who's the Executive Director of the King Hamad Global Center for Coexistence and Tolerance. Abdullah, may I call upon you?
Yes, thank you very much, Sujit, for the introduction. I would like to thank our dear panelists and everyone that has participated in this webinar. One of the strengths of being a young person these days is the ability to navigate technology. It took me a while to be able to log into this webinar and figure out, how to actually do it. But a young person might not have that challenge. But at the same time, young people, due to that technology, have an exaggerated challenge ahead of them. And that challenge is the challenge of the ease of perpetuating hate speech. Hate speech is not something that's just linked to technology. Hate speech has been around since most probably pre-technological days. And based on that, we right now have a challenge ahead of us, both as educators, as politicians, as legislators, as young people, in order for us to be able to put an end to the perpetuation of hate speech. One of the key aspects in doing so is through education. We've seen amazing initiatives from organizations like Arigato International with its ethics education classes or curricula that would be able to take that one step ahead. However, what we hope to hear today from the panelists and those people who are participating is that we want to know what are the concrete steps that can be taken forward in order for us to be able to stop hate speech. We all know that hate speech is bad. We've seen the results of hate speech, whether simple as children committing suicide due to bullying, all the way down to children committing mass murder due to other forms of hate speech and incitement, etc. This disparity is not something that we want to take down our human us as humans. This cannot be the future of our children. Our children have to have a future that is based on understanding, on coexistence, on tolerating the other at the very least. However, once we reach acceptance, once we reach fellowship, that will require the work of educators and those of you that are here that know a lot more than I would ever know about dealing with young minds. One thing that we should not forget is that are the people that actually do deal with the young minds. Those people actually, in terms of educators, in terms of people that put together the curriculums, they are the people that also require support, both emotional support, intellectual support, and even further education. So I will be very excited to hear from each and every one of you, including in terms of different perspectives, but especially from Yara. Because today Yara represents a cross-section of children that will grow up and will be leaders. And I'm sure that in this case, we have a leader for good, but we want to continue that trend and have more leaders for good. So thank you very much. Good luck. And hopefully I will be enjoying, not hopefully, I'm sure I'm going to be enjoying every single word that comes out of this. And I hand it back to you, Sujat.
Thank you, Abdullah. So thank you also to the King Hamad Center for being a partner for this process and this important work that we will take forward. So as Abdullah was reflecting, the challenges are many. Children are faced with unprecedented happenings around the world. The world is very close to them. Interactions are no longer limited by physical limitations. So hate and hate speech can come from many different spaces and many different channels. And then, as it was reflected, it's very important not just to empower the children, but also to empower the adults who have to respond and support children in this reality, educators and parents, communities being very important stakeholders in this. So that's what I think we can keep on discussing today and really try to unpack and understand. I also want to go to this, while there is no specific universal definition for hate speech, there is a definition adopted by the UN Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech that defines hate speech as any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of who they are. In other words, based on their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factors. So based on their identity, if they are targeted specifically and there is targeted communication that incites people, that's discriminatory and attacks that person, that is considered hate speech. So in flowing with our discussion today, we will try to understand the impacts of hate speech on children, what sort of impacts, what are some of the dynamics we see in the world at the moment, and then how should education respond? What are some of the ways we can start to look at this issue? What are some of the root causes that needs to be addressed? And what are strategies that can help us? Of course, the following webinars will go more deeper into practical aspects of addressing hate speech. The second webinar will focus on the practices that can actually respond in classrooms, in schools and communities, good case practices that can respond to the challenge of hate speech. And then the third webinar specifically on the online hate speech. But today we are looking overall at the role of education in responding to hate speech, and looking from different points of view. So with that, maybe we come to our panelists, the experts who will share their opinions with us. And to kick us off, who are better than a child? Voices of children are very important for us as these partners who come together. And so we are happy to have a young child with us to share her experiences, her views. So without further ado, let me invite Yara. Yara is a 17-year-old from Sudan, currently living in Egypt. and has been reflecting on this and has been doing work to build a better world, contributing for children's rights. So let me hand over the floor to Yara with some question, Yara. So from your point of view, Yara, what do you think are impacts of hate speech on children? And how do you think we can respond better at schools, at communities? What can be done better to help children navigate this challenge of hate speech?
Well, thank you so much, Suchit, for this introduction. Referring to your question, I believe that children are not born with prejudice. They learn it from the world around them, whether through family influences. Parents are a child first teachers. If a family member makes a sarcastic comment about some people, a child might absorb this without even questioning them. For example, when parents say, "We do not associate with those people," that's great prejudice. Another thing is through media, like movies, cartoons, or video games. We absorb these messages in an unconscious way. And on that, I have an example. After the war in Sudan, many were displaced across countries. In some of the host countries, influencers and public figures exploited this situation by promoting hate speech. They blamed Sudanese refugees for the rising rents, increased living costs, and living expenses, framing them as a burden rather than a victim. These sayings are really dangerous because when the ordinary citizens listen to these, which are already struggling with economic pressures, they would direct their hate toward the Sudanese communities, leading to hate speech. Another thing is through educational biases, and on that, I have a personal experience I would like to share. In a geography class, my teacher made a sarcastic comment about a group of people, about their religion, calling them names in a mocking way. I didn't know anything about their religion or culture, but his words influenced me, and I began to see them as strange or even less than us. This is actually not only my story, but hundreds of children around the world nowadays absorb their teacher's mindset and their stereotypical way of thinking in a negative way. Some of the suggestions I would like the school to make actually is I believe that schools should start addressing hate speech and educate both children and staff throughout integrational curriculums. And it's really important to engage their families too. And there's a thing. Schools act like social media does not exist. But hate spread faster online. So I encourage digital literacy on how to, for example, stop cyberbullying. And referring to my story of how the teacher influenced me, well, that wasn't the end of the story because later on, I joined an Arigato International event last November in Abu Dhabi. There, I met children from all around the world, including that country. I expected to see what the teacher had described, but instead, I met kind, respectful, and intelligent people, full of love and tolerance. We talked about culture and religion. I felt bad for myself. I didn't hate anyone, but I carried a judgment that was not mine. I absorbed it in class. That's when I realized that education should never pass down prejudice. Education must teach us to learn, to think, and understand before we judge. So I encourage schools to make an event where children from all around the world gather together to share their cultures and religion, so that in the future, when they face diversity, they wouldn't initiate to it with hate. And another thing is, I encourage workshops to teachers before they start to teach, because that one person caused so much harm, not only to me, but the other children in the class too. That's...
Thank you very much, Yara. Thank you. These are very powerful reflections you share. Your reflections also, for me, help me kind of think of the fact that hate speech does not exist in a vacuum. Structural issues, things that are happening around, I can easily contribute to why there is hate speech, why a community is targeted. So hate speech is often connected to what is happening around us. Issues of poverty, when there is violence happening, that makes hate speech more. People tend to be more hateful and target other groups. And at the same time, those targeted things are then escalating more hate speech as well. Right, so that's a very important reflection I take from listening to you, Yara. And you're saying that schools often think that social media does not exist, that education cannot continue like that. The digital literacy and being able to respond to these dynamics of what is happening outside the classroom is crucial. I think you pointed that out. And then as you pointed out, also the impact of teachers who are not sensitive, who've not been trained, who've not received the appropriate capacity building to facilitate education in a sensitive way in a complex world, in a world where there is often very complex issues. So what is the role there? How do we prepare teachers into that role? You also highlight. So thank you, Yara, for starting this conversation in a very powerful way with your own personal experiences, but also of many others around the world. And thank you very much. So let me then, without further ado, go to our second speaker. We'll come back for reflections after that. We are joined by Mr. Kilian Nyambu. Mr. Kilian Nyambu is the Deputy Director for Public Education at the National Cohesion and Integration Commission of Kenya. Welcome, Kilian. Let me share the questions for you. We would like to hear from you. What are some of the dynamics in a country like Kenya when it comes to hate speech and its impact on children? And then as the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, I know that you work often with the education sector to respond to some of the challenges of hate speech in Kenya. Kenya goes through different cycles of, has been challenged by different cycles of violence as well. So during this work that you have been responding and building cohesion in Kenya, how do you work with the education sector? What are some of the value-based education work that Kenya is pioneering to respond to challenges of hate speech? Kilian.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Suchith, and the rest of other panelists and speakers in this wonderful wonderful webinar. My name, as I've heard, is Kilian Nyambu, and I work for the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. Now, Suchith, thank you so much for the two questions. And if you may allow, I will respond them in terms of a presentation which I would wish to make. I don't know whether it is visible.
It is visible. If you can make it full screen, that would be perfect.
Beautiful. What about now?
Yes, perfect.
Is it visible? Oh, absolutely wonderful. And you'll also remind me if it's moving. The slides are moving.
Yes, please.
So can you be able to see my first slide?
Yes, we can.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, as I'd said, within Kenya, we appreciate one thing. We ask ourselves, as a society, as world population, where did the rain start beating us? And we are all aware that in all the religious scripts and scriptures, we are told that we are all human beings. But of course, as time went on, rest started disconnecting us. We refer to each other as Europeans, African, Asians, Arabs, and so on and so forth. Well, again, religion started separating us, that would keep on having some individuals being Christians, others Muslims, others Hindus, and so on and so forth. Then, of course, politics started dividing us, and we see in different parts of the world, people belong to different political formations, and these formations sometimes serve as a source of division. Then, of course, wealth, classifying different citizens of the world between those who have and those ones who have not. So the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, the institutions which I work for, is a statutory body which was established by an act of parliament. We refer to it in Kenya as Act number 12 of 2008, of course, following the unfortunate incidents which visited our country. The institutions has three mandates: to promote equality of opportunities, that is to ensure that everybody is considered equally; then to promote good relations, harmony, and peaceful coexistence between different citizens of the country. But also we have a third mandate, which we normally try to advise the government. Now, turning to the question which Suchith, you have asked, within the Kenyan context, we always define a hate speech as abusive or threatening communication that expresses prejudice on the basis of people's ethnicity. It can be in terms of religion, sexual orientations, or similar grounds. So meaning that within the Kenyan context, as long as we are having people being kind of stereotyped, being abused in terms of the communication we are passing through, based on all those areas, that qualifies within the Kenyan context to be seen as hate speech. And of course, within our context, we look at three broad areas. In terms of the language can be threatening, where you are suggesting or implying harm towards a particular segment of the Kenyan population. It can be abusive or insulting, where probably you'll find people using certain derogatory language or slurs to demean a particular population of the country, as well as inciting. Now, to handle the first part of your question, you asked for us to be able to look at the different dynamics of hate speech, which can be able to happen within our learning institutions in different forms. Sometimes it do happen within the verbal, within the written, or even sometimes in terms of the gestures, which often amplified by social media and other online platforms. And sometimes we end up getting students or learners in different learning institutions getting targeted because either of their ethnicity or their religion or other group affiliation. And consequently, this might lead to feelings of isolation, discrimination, or even sometimes violence among these populace. So this, unfortunately, the hate speech propagated can impact negatively towards the students' mental health, academic performance, social integration, and even a number of them get traumatized, particularly when they're being discriminated or being abused on basis probably of either their ethnicity, their religion, or other forms of association. Now, what are in our observation to most of our learning institutions, what are some of the contributing factors which again bring hate speech related offenses? Sometimes issues to do with social inequality, issues to do with historical grievances, as well as political polarization, do many times within our learning institutions contribute to propagation of hate speech. And of course, pursuant to these incidents, we have seen that because of hate speech, certain incidences like physical violence and other harmful behavior do happen. And of course, as a nation, our unfortunate experience of 2007-08 are a clear testimony on the dangers of hate speech. Now, in our learning institution, there are certain challenges which affect the handling of hate speech related cases. One of the challenges include the lack of effective platform to counter hate speech, in that a number of our schools do not have appropriate platforms where matters hate speech can be addressed in totality. Then equally, it's important to know that also there had been some delays in addressing prejudice and discrimination. When it happens, sometimes you find it takes time for those matters to be addressed. And then again, within the dynamics of hate speech in our learning institutions, sometimes there is inadequate communication regarding existing support mechanism, such that certain students and the school community do not know how can they seek redress mechanism in case hate speech offenses have been committed against them. And then, of course, the biggest challenge which we normally find, particularly on online and social media, is the aspect of misinformation and disinformation which are propagated. Sometimes people tend to bring wrong information just because it's circulating in social media. So to come to your second question, Suchith, what is the commission doing, or how within the Kenyan context, how have we been handling hate speech related issues in order either to prevent and mitigate incidences of hate speech? I want to start this by acknowledging one fact that education has been recognized as a critical tool for countering hate speech, because we through education, we intend to promote tolerance in terms of the different diversities, whether religious, cultural, ethnic, or class. And then as well as, again, to promote critical thinking so that individuals can be able to look at some affairs and be able to know this is wrong and this is right. And within the Commission's interventions within the education sector, we are normally encouraged or motivated by the preamble of UNESCO, which states that since wars begin in the minds of men, then it is in the minds of men that defenses of peace must be constructed. So arising from that, then we must invest heavily within the education sector to ensure that issues to do with hate speech and other issues which affect harmonious coexistence can be addressed. And one way we are trying to do this is through what we call in Kenya peace clubs or amani clubs, because these clubs aim to foster harmonious coexistence. They aim to foster respect for diversity, tolerance, and peaceful conflict resolutions among students and their community. Now, for purposes of participants in this webinar, it's good to understand the framework upon which amani clubs have been formulated. Now, the peace clubs in our learning institutions started taking effect from 2014, arising from the partnership which the NCAC, or the National Cohesion Integration Commission of Kenya, has with the Ministry of Education of Kenya, as well as the Teachers Service Commission. So through this tripartite kind of arrangement, then we have been trying to spearhead the establishment of peace clubs in all learning institutions in the country. And of course, the overall goal of these clubs, as I had earlier mentioned, is to promote good relations. See, how can students relate well to ensure that there's harmony and peaceful coexistence among the students themselves, as well as between the students and the schools, and as well as between the students and the neighboring communities. So in this tripartite arrangement, we are trying to ensure that schools do have these peace clubs so that they can be able to realize the overall objectives. Now, something unique about the peace clubs of Kenya are the guiding principles. There are 5 guiding principles which enable a harmonious coexistence and try to address matters hate speech within learning institutions. The first principle speaks to the inclusivity, in which we expect the membership of these clubs are inclusive, meaning that they bring students from diverse ethnic communities in Kenya. They also bring students from the diverse religious communities, as well as the different classes, whether it is grade 1, grade 2, grade 8, grade 10, and so on and so forth. That is the first thing which, under that principle, we expect our students to be able to be brought up in an environment where they are appreciated that diversity through inclusivity. The second value is about the second principle, guiding principle, is on values. And within Amani Club, it focuses on eight values. That is the values of peace, love, unity, responsibility, respect, patriotism, social justice, and integrity. When students uphold these values, then definitely they will learn to abhor matters hate speech. The third principle is on excellency, where all Amani Club members are inspired to nurture excellence. That is, do their best in everything which they do, as well as considering giving back to the community through volunteerism and community service. Finally, the final guiding principles of Amani Club speaks to the matters whole school approach, where we expect everybody in the school to be involved, starting from the learners, the teachers, non-teaching staff, supporting staff, board of management, as well as family members and the larger, wider school community. So specifically now, to address matters hate speech within the education sector, the Commission, through Amani Club, have been trying to promote peace education by engaging learners in experiential learning activities, promoting dialogue among the students, as well as skill building to help students create inclusive spaces. And this has been being done through 4 ways. The first way is through creating physical and emotional environment or safe spaces where children can feel secure, respected, and free from discrimination or fear of hate speech. We understand that young children, they're very, very vulnerable. And if there are no safe spaces for them to engage, then there's the highly chances for them to suffer from abuse. So Amani Club really tries to provide safe space by creating physical and emotional environment through the peace gardens where students meet, sit down, interact. The second way in which through the peace clubs, we have been trying to empower children to voice their opinions. Remember, many times it's the adults who speak, children's listen. And so they are encouraged to voice their opinions. And in doing so, they challenge injustice and actively participate in peace-building initiatives. And many times this is done through dialogue meetings, then participating in public events. The third way is through building learners' resilience. So how do we ensure that learners are resilient in matters hate speech? This is through equipping them with coping mechanism and critical thinking skills, which enable them to resist and respond to hate speech related matters. They protect their psychological well-being and related affairs. And the last, which is the fourth way in which under Amani Club, together with the Ministry of Education, is to provide victim support, where some children who have suffered matters hate speech or other related injustices are provided with counseling for psychosocial support, mentorship, and other support networks for the children who have been affected. Now, this is within the platform of Amani Club. But again, as an institution and as a nation, we work very closely with Arugatu's ethics education. And from this, we have really been, we have really benefited most of our learning institution, because the ethics education advances value-based education for children with a transformative approach to interfaith and intercultural learning. So far, we have a program which we call Learning to Live Together, which is being rolled in several schools in the country. And the good thing about the programs for ethics education, that is the Learning to Live Together, is that it has enabled to provide students and learners with an opportunity to strengthen their sense of self and purpose. It has helped learners to empathize and respect people from other cultures, as well as religions and beliefs. And finally, this Learning to Live Together program, together with the overall ethics education in our learning institutions, has empowered learners to reconcile their differences with others, take care of the environment, and transform their communities together. The last issue I would also present in response to your second question is our engagement through the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. So the Commission, together with other government agencies, particularly with the Ministry of Education, we have been supportive of the value-based education being propagated and championed by the Kenya Institute of Education. Now, for those participants who are outside Kenya, it's good to note that we are replacing our previous education curriculum with a new curriculum, which we call it competency-based curriculum. Now, this new curriculum, which is now currently being rolled out in different levels of education, it aims to instill positive values and ethical principles in learners for holistic development. Now, within this value-based education, it has equally some eight values. And of course, the values, as you can see, but more so, it also helps it to promote self-efficacy, digital literacy, and other key competencies like communication, critical thinking, and creativity. So, Suchith, those are the interventions.
Thank you very much, Killian. Very important reflections. I think you also built on what Yara shared in terms of how structural issues are very much part of what propagates hate speech and how hate speech exists in relation to many of the structural issues and how that has happened in Kenya specifically. I reflect that you highlight
As I
two.
conclude, yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Did you want to wrap up something, Killian? I thought you had finished. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. My wrap up was on the quote from Albert Einstein, who said, "Peace cannot be kept by force; it can only be kept or achieved by understanding." So mine is to appreciate this opportunity to discuss with each one of us, and I submit. Thank you, Suchith.
Thank you very much, Killian. These are very important reflections as I was sharing. And I take two different aspects of the role of education you highlighted. One is the regulatory aspect of it, how when hate speech occurs in educational spaces, how education institutions, teachers, the administration are ready to respond to that challenge, how what are the processes put in place to prevent hate speech, and when it happens, what are processes put in place, both to tackle that issue, but also to support the victims. I think you highlighted that role, which is very important for us, that there is a robust, dynamic system able to respond when there is prevalence of hate speech around us. And then the second role you highlighted is the transformative role of education that complements the regulatory role, that then seeks to engage the child, build the resilience in the child, build the awareness, the capacity, and bring their voices as a way to transform the root causes of hate speech. I think that is what you built on in terms of the programs that you highlighted on values-based education in Kenya, that really from the level of inculcating supporting values-based learning to take place, how that then is brought into voices of children and how they are able to respond to hate speech, and then transformative actions, even as peace clubs or Amani clubs are leading actions to respond to hate speech in different levels as well. And then you spoke of also the curriculum-related processes in place in Kenya, which is, again, very important, how we also respond to contemporary issues. So with that, maybe with the first two speakers, let's I open up for some questions as well from the audience, and then we can go back to the next speakers. I see maybe two questions I can take on at this point. Maybe the first question to Yara. Yara, there's a question asking what would be your recommendations, Yara, in terms of online hate speech and how digital citizenship, how children are, how should the education system help children better respond to these challenges?
Okay, I believe that prejudice is not born in the heart, but in our ignorance. And only education can open the windows to truly understand those who are different from us. So there's a lot of ways online even, platforms can support and promote peace, like encouraging positive online behavior. For example, role models in sharing content that promotes kindness, diversity, and inclusion. And also let children participate on creating videos, reels, or even posts that share their experience and views on kindness versus hate, for example. Another thing is set up moderated groups or forums where children can express themselves safely. So there's a lot of ways online platforms can introduce us to peace rather than hate speech.
Thank you very much, Yara. I think that's very important, how instead of demonizing the technology or the platforms, how we use them in a positive way and create that positive capacity in our learners, our children, so that can respond to challenges. So thank you, Yara, for highlighting that. Then maybe I go to the second question to Killian. Killian, there is a question asking around primary education. So my question is, you spoke of the Amani Peace Clubs as well. How do we take this across the wider education system from the primary to the secondary? What do you see are some of the gaps when it comes to the age appropriateness of something like hate speech? So often maybe educators will say, okay, these are too young, so we don't need to tackle these kind of topics or issues with them. So how do you advise when it comes to younger children, what should be our approach in addressing hate speech?
Sorry, please come up again. I didn't get the question clearly.
The question is asking, how does this translate to primary education? How can we bring up addressing hate speech at primary education level? Maybe hinting that maybe younger children maybe need a different nuance in how we approach them and engage them in these issues. So maybe if you can also share what you think ways that we can look at bringing these kind of issues in through the value-based education work that you do. How do we approach younger children and primary education, even early childhood? Is there linkages that we need to make sure that age-appropriate learning takes place around issues like this?
Thank you so much, Suchith. There are different ways in which we are trying to engage children at different levels, particularly those ones who might be young. The first is through role play and modeling. We try to also engage with their teachers, the respective teachers, to be able to pick some very interactive, informative engagement through the role play, through interactive games, so that they can now start knowing that there are certain aspects which are not right, which are wrong, and they can also try to encourage and provide those safe spaces which they can also be able to communicate in cases of situations of abuse or matters which have affected them. Then, because we want them to be more proactive, there are a lot of experiential learning experiences, which through their respective class teachers as well as their respective peers, they are taken through so that they can be able to distinguish issues, activities, words, and maybe assertions, which probably they might be abusive, which they might constitute hate speech, and then again encourage to report some of this. Then lastly, whenever we have parental engagements, because in Kenyan system of education, there are certain days which are meant for parents to come to school and interact with the teachers and their students, then similar messages are passed to the parents so that when they go home, they can be able to know their roles which they can play in nurturing their students to be students who are all-round, ethical, and value-laden. Suchith.
Thank you, Kilian. Thank you for this reflection. So let us move now to the second round of our panelists sharing their reflections and expertise. I will first invite Professor Dr. Sebastian Waugh from the University of Münster. Professor, your research, the work that you've been doing in classrooms and on classroom climate and empathy as a key factor in contributing to hate speech. What practical steps can educators take to build this kind of learning environment that is empathic, that responds to some of the challenges that we've been speaking about, especially when there is cultural or religious nuances to these issues that propagate hate speech. Also, when your study talks of bystander response to hate speech, how especially adolescents respond as bystanders, and where empathy and moral disengagement are part of the bystander response. So I can invite you to share from your research and the work that you've been doing, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, these are quite interesting questions. And in our first step, we tried to understand these associations, and then we used our findings to develop our prevention program, which is called Hateless. So in the following steps, I want to briefly show you what Hateless is, how the program is structured, what didactic materials are included, and of course the question, is Hateless effective? Finally, I will conclude with some take-home messages and an outlook on future research. So the first question I want to answer today is, what is Hateless? Hateless is a school-based prevention program that aims to tackle hate speech among young people and to empower young people to counter hate speech. Originally, this program was developed for students in grade 7 to 9, and the program was developed based on empirical research, which we conducted, and the broader research field. Also, general recommendations from prevention research, like related areas like bullying, cyberbullying, and other evaluated prevention programs. So, Hateless can be implemented by teachers or social workers autonomously as a 1-hour, day, or week program. Here you can see which skills we like to address or we would like to improve by Hateless. So students should develop more method competencies, social and self competencies. And now I want to show you how Hateless is structured. So you can see here the 1-week prevention program. Each module has one specific topic, and each module represents one school day. In Germany, normally schools have like 6 hours, and you can see here the different topics and activities students are doing. So in the first module, we are talking about what is hate speech and what is the difference between free speech and hate speech. In the second module, we talk about reasons, risk factors about hate speech. We talk about what is normality and how is normality constructed by ourselves. In the third module, we talk about consequences for individual students, but also for the society as a whole. And in the fourth module, we talk about intervention strategies. How can students react when they are targeted by hate speech, etc. On the last day in module 5, the students think about activities to become a hateless school. So I can only very briefly show you some insights into the program. Now the question is, what didactic materials did we develop to support the implementation of Hateless? So here you can see a bunch of materials we developed. For example, you can see here our manual. This is a book. We developed PowerPoint slides that help teachers, social workers to carry out the intervention in schools. All materials are for everyone accessible via our website. It's only in German though. And to make the program not only attractive or appealing for the teachers, but also for the students, we developed a few small animation videos where some difficult topics are introduced on a funny age appropriate way, you know? So the manual is the core of the program, and it includes theories and empirical research in a general part, and then there is a basic of the prevention program where we describe each modules, each actions during this model, and where teachers can inform how they can conduct the prevention program. So another idea we had that we wanted to make the program, especially for young people, appealing. And this is why we thought it might be good to have some kind of hateless heroes. Our Anura, Bennett, Carla, Hamza, and Laura, these are our hateless heroes. And those students structure the program, give the topic a personal character. For example, Hamza is telling students how it feels to become target of hate speech. And also they should be role models which inspire to imitate, reflect, and have personal discussions on the topic of hate speech. So we have nice material, right? And prevention programs should not only be nice and handy, they should be effective, especially if schools spending so much time in implementing such programs. So we conducted a study to try to understand whether hateless does change anything in the student body. So we used, like it is normally done, a quasi-experimental design with a pre-post control group design. I spare you with the details and just show you which effects we found. We found that hateless improved the inclusive classroom climate, classroom cohesion, empathy towards victims of hate speech, self-efficacy in intervening against hate speech, and factual knowledge about hate speech. For example, the students were more able to distinguish hate and free speech. Finally, the program increased counter speech and reduced online hate speech and online hate speech perpetration and victimization. So we found evidence for short-term effects, and the intervention group, those students who participated in hate speech, told us that they were satisfied with hateless, that in their experience there's less hate speech in their classrooms after the prevention week. There's more collaboration between students, more support of each other's. There is a kind of improved atmosphere within the classroom and friendlier interaction. Finally, they had the experience that participating in hateless improved the teacher-student relationship. So my take-home message is great news. Hateless is successful in increasing empathy, self-efficacy, counter-speech in the short term. But we need follow-up control group designs to assess long-term effects. So we don't know how long, how stable these effects are. And we sure do need more examinations of other potential effects. And we need to understand whether hateless is only successful in tackling hate speech in the German context or in other countries as well. So we need to understand whether there is a cross-cultural validity of the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's very interesting to look at how your program has looked into some of the dynamics that our previous panelists shared and put them into a more structured analysis in a way, and looked at the evidence in how the capacities were developed in the learners through the intervention. I think we can come back to some of the questions. I was wondering how the community engagement part of this process was it limited to the school and the classroom, and was there a community engagement? I'll come back to you after the other speakers to maybe we can build on that, how maybe that can be as well to understand. I also appreciate how effort was put really to bring more digital material, more interactive materials to learners that are really more dynamic and engaging for them and appropriate for them to tackle some of these sensitive issues. Thank you very much for this concrete example of the work that you have done that we can all learn from. I especially value that in many sort of programming work that happens in the development sector, some people think peace education happens in these countries that are more in active conflict, or in countries where where there's war going on, and they don't see the need for investing in this kind of work in other places. So your example from Germany, I think, is a very important example how all parts of the world, this critical education needs to happen in a world where polarization, while incitement is so prevalent, it needs to be across the world from Asia to the Americas. So thank you very much for highlighting that. So let me next go to our next panelist. That's His Excellency David Pugnana. He's the ambassador and the permanent observer for the United Nations University for Peace to Vienna and Geneva, and also to Paris for UNESCO. Ambassador, my questions to you. All of this happens, there's many dynamics taking place around the world, and peace building has been evolving, trying to respond to some of these challenges as well. So how do we understand what are some of the global dynamics that are and new approaches to peace building that can help us to look at how we respond to hate speech through education? And often we find, and I think it's already been shared by other, it's a difficult topic to approach, and educators often sides this around more difficult conversations. So what do you think can help educators to tackle issues like hate speech? What capacities do we need to develop to help them, especially in contexts where it's multicultural? Ambassador.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Suchi, for all the wonderful moderation that you are doing. Thank you very much also the organizers of this event, Arigato International, King Hamad Global Center on Coexistence and Tolerance, and all colleagues and fellows from UNESCO. Let me start saying that today it's we are celebrating, or we are commemorating, the so-called International Day on countering hate speech. This is a resolution promoted at the General Assembly, and what we are doing today is implementing one of the resolutions, making awareness about the challenges that we have in the international arena, the international community in regards to hate speech. Saying that, I would like then to ask to the audience how it's manifest, the hate speech in the world today. It's manifest through different ways. We have the so-called Islamophobia, we have the Christianophobia, the anti-Semitism, but at the end of the day, everything is connected with this dehumanization, not only the dehumanization and demonization of the other. It's a lack of empathy, it's a lack of trustfulness. In fact, we need then also to recall that this year is also the International Day of Trust. This is what we are, lacking. It's trust among all the people, nations. And this is the real crisis of the world today, the multilateralism. And then hate speech appear as one of these consequences. But if we go to the root causes of hate speech, we need to go to the international human rights law, in particular, the discrimination on the base on race, discrimination on the base of economic status, because what we are now facing and witnessing, it's a discrimination and the use of hate speech against the minorities, and they are these the poorest. And this is really one of the root causes of hate speech, not because they are for the Latinos, Black people, the Asians in our society. But my question is how, as an international community, as a civil society, how we can to counter hate speech. And then one way, of course, is through education. But it's let me be frank with you. We cannot settle everything through education, and I absolutely agree. And I would like them to recall what our colleague, the child, say. No, Jared, he say that the environment also influence a lot in framing the spirit of the child. We have research. We have a real. Scientific research that say that the formal education influence in the life of the child only, we can put on a percentage only the 30%. The rest is influenced by the environment. For that reason, we need then to distinguish between what is so-called in UNESCO the formal and informal education. And the informal education, we need to include subjects about culture of peace, education for peace. But in the formal education, is also an important factor then to promote these values of cooperation, the values of dialogue among all the civilization. Let me recall that resolution adopted in the General Assembly that another way to counter the hate speech is through the intercultural and interfaith dialogue. In this regard, it's important the work that is made by the United Nations in the field, by UNESCO, by UNFPA, by the civil society on the field. And we have some real examples coming from the colleagues from Kenya or from Germany. They give us or they guide us about how we can tackle this real challenge. Today, this year, we are celebrating the 80th anniversary of the UN. The United Nations was based on the principle of dialogue, cooperation, and the respect of all the religions and cultures. It's a moment also to include this value, the UN values, in the current work of the schools in order to show to the kids that the importance that about the multilateralism, because we are not living alone. We are living in a multipolar world with many religions and cultures and countries. But let me also finalize saying the following. As I already say, we cannot overestimate education, saying the education is the only way. No, education is also connected, and the promotion and fulfillment of the right to education is also connected with the promotion and protection of all human rights for all. In particular, we cannot have education, for instance, if we don't fulfill the right to housing, or the right to food, or the right to a healthy environment. For that reason, education should be also seen not in isolation, should be seen also in the context of all the most basic human rights of human beings. I have then to finalize again, congratulating all the partners for organizing the today event, this webinar that I understand, and we are very proud in the University for Peace to take part on this adventure with you in order then to have more webinars about hate speech and to have tools in order to tackle from roots causes the hate speech. Thank you very much, all of you, for the attention, and thank you again for all your work. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Punyana. Thank you for this important sort of flagging that education can't solve everything, but that it has its unique role to play, and how important in this current world is us having these conversations around multilateralism and its role in building a more empathic world. And I think it's very important that we take those conversations to the level of children and engage them also in envisioning what multilateralism means in this current dynamic and what is going on in the world. So I think that's something very important that you highlight. So let me then maybe invite our next panelist to share her perspectives. We are joined by Ms. Joyce Pone, who's the Chief of Education at the new UNESCO's New Delhi office for South Asia, the New Delhi-based regional office for South Asia. Joyce, you work more directly on education as part of the work that UNESCO is doing. So what are some of the frameworks that we can leverage at country levels? What are some of the existing interventions happening? What are some of the international interventions happening in trying to strengthen this role of education in addressing hate speech. And then who should we work with in this? I think other panelists have highlighted that this education can't work alone in doing this work. So who should we really look to bring to the table to do this work in different places, in different countries, and what might be some of the sensitivities we might need to take into account in doing that? And I also I'm reflecting from the previous speakers also the need to bring in the community, but then how do we do that in a sensitive way when we try to engage the larger community into the education work on issues of hate speech that can be quite sensitive? Maybe you can help us reflect on these, Jais.
Thank you, Suchith, and thank you everybody for being here today. First of all, I'd like to thank Arigato International, the other co-organizers, the King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence and Tolerance, and UPeace, for coming together to discuss such an important topic, particularly on the celebration of the International Day for Countering Hate Speech. And so if I may just make a comment, Suchith, that listening to Yara at the beginning of this webinar, I think there's absolutely no doubt that the topic we're discussing today is very critical if we as educators, members of civil society, academicians, and even policymakers are really serious about working together to build a more inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable future. And so coming to your question, I'm sitting here today to explain that, of course, education is at a unique crosspoint in addressing hateful, harmful speech, because we're simultaneously thinking of creating safe learning spaces where children and young adults and young people can encounter diverse perspectives in a meaningful and safe manner, where they can develop really critical thinking. But as Yara had mentioned, unfortunately, this is exactly where they first experience and often perpetuate harm. So the challenge that we face isn't just about identifying what constitutes harmful speech. It's about building safe educational environments that can protect both students from real harm while fostering open dialogue and understanding that's essential for learning. And so we need, as all education stakeholders here, to really understand and navigate these complex tensions between free expression and safety, and also between diverse community values and shared educational goals, while understanding context and local issues that are really important for each community. So what I want to focus on are to answer your questions about frameworks from the international point of view to also practical ones. And these are so that we as diverse stakeholders can engage meaningfully and thoughtfully to create safe spaces, because ultimately addressing harmful speech also isn't just about policies and curricula. And as Sebastian had mentioned, whether or not there is data or can it work in this context and across the world, because it's also about engaging and building communities where every student can learn and they can grow and they can contribute to the future safely. So some of the international frameworks that I'd like to just mention include the United Nations International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which prohibit advocacy of hatred that constitutes incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence. Then there is the more recent United Nations Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech in 2019. And this comprehensive framework was adopted by the United Nations to combat hate speech across different sectors, including education. And it also encourages context-specific interventions, respect for freedom of expression, and preventive approaches through inclusive and equitable education. Coming down to the educational frameworks, the ones that are very pertinent and and as many of the other panelists have also referred to, include the SDG 4, that's the one on quality education. And as many around the table know, there are many different targets of this Sustainable Development Goal on education. I'd like to speak specifically on target 4.7, which is very much geared towards promoting education for global citizenship, human rights, and peace, all of which are very, very key and central in countering hate speech through long-term prevention. Coming to global citizenship education, in an area where UNESCO has worked very much with Arigato International on many spheres, GCED, or Global Citizenship Education, promotes respect for diversity and human rights, social and emotional learning frameworks that build empathy and critical thinking, and as many of the other panelists have also mentioned, digital citizenship, which also addresses online hate speech specifically. Then recently in 2022, UNESCO had developed its own policy guide on addressing hate speech through education, which provides integrated framework for policymakers, ministries of education, officials, educators, and partners to prevent and respond to hate speech through policy, pedagogy, teacher training initiatives, curriculum development, and whole school approaches. Because as I will explain in a little while, you mentioned that this work towards preventing and combating and addressing hate speech cannot be done just by one social group alone. It has to be together, and speaking as in the framework of schools, it really needs the entire whole school approach to work together towards this goal. Then also, UNESCO, as a standard-setting body of the United Nations, we have also developed through consultation with our member states, recommendations on education for peace, human rights, and sustainable development that was just recently adopted. And this recommendation provides the normative guidance on the role of education in promoting peaceful, inclusive societies and combating discrimination, hate, and violence. Now, if I were to speak about national frameworks, again, this has to do a lot with what is contextualized, because what matters in one community and in one national educational context may differ from another. And so, for example, in India, there is the National Education Policy, which promotes value-based education, constitutional literacy, and critical thinking, so that it offers scope to address hate speech through civic and digital literacy. Coming to your second question as to which key stakeholders need to be involved in this common objective, of course, there are those at the policy level, including ministries of education, that set the standards, and they are gatekeepers for curriculum development and teacher training reform, so that if they are part of the solution, they have ownership on what are the policies to be implemented, and also which are essential to scale up at the national level. We have, of course, teachers, educators, and school leaders who are the first and foremost at the forefront of education themselves. And they need to be equipped and given training to improve their capacities, to reinforce their capacities to effectively identify and address hate speech in both online and offline environments. And what we are proposing is that these trainings should also focus on fostering inclusive classrooms that promote respect for diversity, as Killian had mentioned earlier, and to ensure safe and supportive learning spaces. These educators could be equipped to cultivate values of peace, critical thinking, as well as media and information literacy, so that there is a feeling of mutual respect among learners and educators themselves. The youth, we are here today to speak with the younger generation. And in the South Asian region, as you may know, we are the most populous region in the world now. And we have a high youth population, and many of whom are active on social media. So we need to engage them to become responsible change makers, to understand critically if information that they are receiving and that they're passing are actually those that build and contribute towards inclusive societies. There are civil society organizations that we need to reach out to, also influential role models, be it online or offline. And these are often the role models and the personalities that young people look up to emulate, and what they say often reflects how they want to also become and speak. And I just want to also say that nowadays education is not centered around the four walls of education. Learning happens everywhere, and especially for the younger generation, they often find and they obtain their education more through digital sources. And this is exactly where the importance of role models, digital role models, are equally important to be so that they're included in building together strategies to combat and address hate speech. Now, I've mentioned about sensitivities, and of course, again, from what we have found in working on issues of to address hate speech, is the importance of contextualization, because unless the communities themselves adhere to the values and the policies or the strategies that they want to use and what they want to also promote, then it would be very difficult to scale and also to continue and make it sustainable, because as colleagues have said, it isn't just a one-off intervention. What we aim to do is to really have something set in, and that it can continue without the outside intervention. It has to be the community itself that is continuing the progress. And so for South Asia, if I may go back to that, there is a very complex socio-political and cultural environment. There are many layers to this, and education offers one of the more sustainable pathways to counter hate speech, because through this understanding of critical thinking, of respect for the other, and to shape inclusive narratives, I think this is the only way and the sustainable way to equip learners as well as teachers to become more resilient, empathetic, and socially responsible citizens. I hope I'm able to answer some of the questions, Sujith. So I'm handing the floor back to you.
Thank you, Joyce. Again, very important reflections around contextualization, that it needs a very specific approach across countries, while there are instruments that we can leverage upon in addressing hate speech around the world. And I think some of the human rights instrument, I think Ambassador Punyana also spoke of how important that we see this as part of the conversation and the protection of rights of individual, and how that education contributes to that larger securing of rights and dignity of on people. Maybe I quickly thanking Joyce, because we are coming towards the end of the webinar. There are many comments in the questions and answers thread. I encourage some of our panelists to also respond to them directly, because we will not have time to go through them all. But very important reflections, experiences being shared here from our participants. I see from Nepal, Kenya, Colombia, Romania, Moldova, Uganda. So from actually world over, many different experiences and questions being framed as well. There are quite a few questions that speak about how to how-to part of it, the practice of it. And I think that's a conversation we will have in the second webinar, which really focuses more on the how-to part, the actual way of classroom and school-based practices that we can highlight. What do we do? How do we do it? And that's the focus of the second webinar. And then I see quite a lot of questions that focused on the digital aspect of it. That it will be our third webinar. So because of this time limitation, I can flag those two webinars as places we can explore some of those questions in depth. But for now, we've been looking at the overall role. So it's not necessarily all the ways of how to do it, but building on this practical experience, what is the role of education? How do we bring all these stakeholders towards this specific issue while education is burdened with many different things? We have overburdened curriculums, we have teachers with many different asks from them, and these same teachers are being asked to respond to something so specific and very challenging as well. So maybe I pose two questions to our three panelists who are on the second route, and you feel free to respond to which either one of those as you feel comfortable. So first question is that if with these challenges in the education system and many things that we want to address through education, the specific issue of hate speech, how do we really get what can help teachers really pick it up and be able to be responsive and create this learning environments that respond to this challenge? So that's maybe the first question. The second one is this multi-stakeholder approach. As we said, hate speech often exist within larger structural issues of inequalities, discriminations, rights issues that exist, power dynamics existing between communities. But then we also we talk about bringing the communities into this process as well as education. Sometimes the education sector has this hesitancy to open it up because we don't know whether it will go out of control. Do we invite different stakeholders to be part of this, or do we limit it to educational professionals who have more understanding of the nuances and limit it to that? But I think we've talked about the importance of bringing multi-stakeholder approach. So then how do we really bring this community leaders into this process? We have traditional leaders, we have religious leaders, we have community leaders who might not necessarily take it from an education point of view, but we need to work with them to address this issue. So these two questions: one, how do we really help the teacher who's with many demands to respond to this specific issue of hate speech? And then how do we work with the larger community, especially community leaders, traditional leaders, religious leaders, women leaders, and engage them, knowing that they might not have the full understanding of what education is trying to do, but then still bringing them on board to this process. So these are the two questions I leave for the three panelists. Who would maybe who would like to go first? I can. Professor, would you like to maybe first go and respond?
I think Sebastian has left.
Okay, so he had to step out, I think, because of time. Joyce, would you be comfortable to take on?
Sure. Yes, teachers are very burdened with many responsibilities within as a teacher, as an educator. And so from our experience, what they really want to know is concrete activities, often activities that have been tested either in their own community or in their own settings, but also from other experiences or from around the world. What has worked and what has not? Because not only do they have to balance their teaching responsibilities, but often some teachers are also given extra work and responsibilities that have nothing to do with school. So they want clear-cut guidance. And they don't often have the time to go into many manuals and guides, but they want concrete actions. At the same time, often it's the reality that sometimes school itself and teachers themselves are also proponents of harmful speech. We need to realize that not everyone considers this particular objective as important, and some, as Yara had mentioned, actually perpetuate discriminatory language and harmful activities. So that's one thing we have to tackle. And your other question, would you mind repeating that actually?
In terms of the engaging stakeholders, we want to bring on all stakeholders on board, but then how do we do that, especially bringing religious, what are sensitivities, how do we,
Yes. What needs to happen is very slow and very concentrated dialogue among the different community members and stakeholders, because a community or a society isn't just built of one stakeholder, and each has their value. But in understanding and in respecting where the space for everyone to complement towards a peaceful society is highly important. And that's why we can't say that, no matter how hard, I think the understanding that we ourselves, everyone has their own biases, but to put that aside and to understand that we're going towards something that is mutually beneficial for all is the first step. Whether it's the religious, whether it's the academics or political, they all have space, and we all need to be in this dialogue together. It often is very slow, but in order for it to move forward, that's the only way. And there's a saying, I think, that says that if you want to go quickly, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you have to go together. So hopefully that is one way to tackle the situation. Back to you.
Thank you, Joyce. Ambassador Punyana, if you are still there, your reflections. I think he might have had to step out as well. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm going to invite maybe Yara to also share the final reflection before we wrap up. Yara, like, having listened to this conversation, do you have any recommendations you would like to share? What is the final message you would like to share with us?
Well, nothing for me to add, but I would like to wrap up by saying I would like to thank you for giving me, as a child, the opportunity to participate in this important event. I believe you now have taken the step toward involving children by listening to their voices and allowing them to take part in stopping hate speech. I recommend creating opportunities within school, in the media, and even the governmental level for children to participate in reducing the spread of hate speech. So let's leave here today with the hope and determination. Change starts with us, and together we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yara, for that powerful sharing and highlighting the importance of children's agency in responding to hate speech and transformative. Of course, not putting the burden on children that they need to solve this problem for us, but understanding that children can play a crucial role in helping us to solve a problem that we have created. So thank you, Yara. As we wrap up today's webinar, I think we have really looked at the broad role of education in responding and addressing to hate speech. Part of it in a regulatory way, how we respond when there is hate speech in our educational spaces, and how we regulate and how do we bring support to those who are victimized by hate speech. And then also in the transformative approach in building capacities of our learners, building resilience, building a more empathic generation that can respond both offline and online to some of the dynamics. We've also talked about the limitations of education in terms of not being able to maybe address all structural issues that are very much intertwined with hate speech and poverty to violence, war, and many other aspects that go beyond education, but how still education needs to work with those issues and be sensitive. And at the same time, the role of education in convening there is a power that education has in bringing people together. Many people want to invest and support education of our new generation. So how does education also convene people to address this issue and work with different stakeholders, and that role of education as well? We've highlighted how crucial it is to empower teachers and the teacher training and curriculums that really respond to some of these challenges, or understanding that we are in a world with many demands, but having key tools, more user-friendly approaches, things that easily can translate to local context, helps us in that. So the role of developing this kind of new tools, gamified things, to digital resources, as shared by some of our panelists today. How do we do that and really find processes that put children's voice at the heart of this transformation as well? So I think those are some of the key aspects we've been talking about today. As I said, some of the questions raised today were very much around how to do these things. I think that I would like to my colleague to share the final slide that highlights the next 2 webinars. So our next webinar is going to be in July, and that webinar focuses on a transformative approach to address hate speech through education, very much the how-to part of this conversation, concrete examples and practices that can help us tackle in a dynamic way this issue through education. Then in September, we want to pick up the 3rd phase of this webinar series, the 3rd webinar, and looking at a digital generation, addressing impacts of hate speech on children and youth online, and how they can be also, how this digital generation can be maybe the leading group in doing this process, how we leverage on the digital literacy to address some of the challenges online that maybe us adults are less familiar with. So these are very important conversations, and I think each webinar will have very interesting speakers joining us, organizations joining us, countries represented as well. So we hope that all of you will be joining for these webinars. With that, I also would like to thank all the panelists, Joyce Pond from the UNESCO Regional Office for South Asia. Then we had Ambassador Punyana from the University of Peace. We had Abdullah from the King Hamad Center for Global Center for Coexistence and Tolerance. We also had Mr. Kilian from the National Cohesion and Integration Commission of Kenya, and we had Dr. Sebastian from the University of Münster, Germany. And very importantly, Yara's voice, I think, was a very important part of this conversation, listening to her experiences. So thank you, Yara, for being part of this with us and sharing your perspectives and reflecting together with us. Lastly, thanking all the partners. I also thank all of you who joined this important conversation, spent your valuable time to discuss this and listen to this conversation. We look forward to your participation going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Yara. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to also our interpreters who've been helping with Arabic and French interpretation. We really appreciate you.